Welcome to Show Don't Tell Writing with me, Suzy Vidori, where I teach you the tried and true secrets to writing fiction, nonfiction that are going to wow your readers, broken down step by step. We're going to explore writing techniques. I'm going to show you a glimpse behind the scenes of successful writers' careers that you wouldn't have access to otherwise. And I'm also going to coach writers live on their pages so that you can learn and transform your own storytelling. Whether you're just starting out, you're drafting your first book, you're editing, or you're currently rewriting that book, or maybe even your 10th book, this show's going to help you unlock the writing skills that you didn't even know you needed, but you definitely do. I'm so looking forward to helping you get your amazing ideas from your mind onto your pages in an exciting way for both you and your readers so that you can achieve your wildest writing dreams. And you're going to also have some fun doing it. Let's dive in. On today's podcast, I have a special treat because Michael Dunn is coming on and he is also a fellow editor. And so he's being super brave because he knows that you can't always see what's going on in your own pages. So I love that Michael submitted a page for a one-page review. We're going to do Show Don't Tell on his one page. So Michael is a creative writer and an editor stuck for now in a corporate body. Oh boy, do I know how that feels, Michael. His love affair with books was kindled by the original Alfred Hitchcock Presents The Three Investigators series written by Robert Arthur. Shortly afterward, Michael began attending school in England, where his father had a large personal library of hardcover novels ranging from Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead to Daphne du Maurier's Jamaica Inn and everything in between. Later, while living in the Middle East, Michael's wife, tired of hearing him grouse about poorly written books, and uttered a life-changing challenge. It's kind of a dare, right? Well, if you can do better, and thus began a long journey of learning and eventually hanging out his shingle as an editor. More recently, in addition to regular fiction and nonfiction editing, Michael is also the author of the Scooter the Bravest Bear children's book series, with each book written and published for the Isaiah 4110 Foundation, which raises funds for pediatric cancer research. Michael has also published fantasy and science fiction short stories with a gothic adventure novella and 3-volume fantasy series in progress. Michael currently lives in northern Alabama with his beautiful wife, who still challenges him, and their opinionated German Shepherd, Tika. Michael understood the assignment, and he sent in a one-pager for the podcast, which is an action scene, which I think was a really, really smart choice. I'm going to read it for you now, and then Michael and I are going to review it together. His right shoulder drooped down, the body's natural attempt to separate itself from the pain and shock of the wound. Several other bolts hit near him, but thank the goddess they all missed. Casting a quick glance behind, Atreus saw the shadows pursuing him. The initial shock and flight reflex began to wear off, and the pain of the arrow still lodged in his shoulder threatened to bring him down. As he ran, Atreus wondered briefly if they'd poisoned the arrowhead with some agent or other. He knew he couldn't go on much longer. A hiss had begun to sound in his ears, and with every step it grew louder. Unconsciousness called to him with a seductive voice. He began to yearn for it as the struggle to escape rendered him weaker and weaker. Why should he endure the pain? Why did he flee? What was he even running from that was so horrible? Another minute passed, during which it felt like he ran through treacle, the ground itself conspiring to slow him down. He willed his legs to keep going, pumping his left arm to add momentum while his right hung useless. The sibilant sound grew to an almost continuous thunder in his ears, and Atreus knew the end was near. Above the roar in his ears, he heard a shout. He stumbled to a halt and looked over his left shoulder. Sir Adrian stood at the edge of the tree line, wreathed in torchlight, with another next to him. Atreus squinted through the pane. The other person remained indistinct despite the blazing torch in the Baron's hand. And then he fell into darkness. Welcome, Michael Dunn, to the podcast, Show Don't Tell Writing. I am so excited to meet you today.
Well, thank you, Suzy. Thanks for having me.
All right. So I love this page that I just read for the audience that we are going to take a look at together today. Michael hasn't seen these edits, although this is just going to be fun, and he will get all of this afterwards so that you don't have to take notes.
We can just be in it right now, brainstorming on what's going on. So tell me, this book, how long have you been writing it?
Now you're going to ask me to reveal the big secrets, Suzy.
Ah, it's
And
big secrets, right? This is something that we don't talk about. The answer might be 3 weeks. Sometimes the answer is 3 weeks, and sometimes the answer is 10 years. And they're both valid. They're both so interesting to our listeners.
yeah, so the honest answer is since 1990.
I love that. Well, what's kept you going all these years? I mean, obviously, when we say this, it means probably that it's not like you're writing it every day for that many years, 35 years, right? It's like you probably had a rendition of it and now you're picking it up again. Is that like, I'm guessing here? You let us know.
Yeah, it's very organic, the word people use today. It all started with the dare that I included in the bio. It's, my wife would get tired of hearing me grouse about the quality of books that I was reading. And she's like, well, if you can do better, I'm like, well, all right, I will. And so, in 1990, that's a long time ago, but we had a PC. So I got up and I banged out a chapter or two. And I'm like, okay, no, that's not bad. But it was horrible. I've been in the corporate world my whole life. So it would get put down, a year, 2 years. I go back to it. But it's always been in my head. And really, the organic part is that I've learned so much about writing between then and now that I've had this epiphany, right, if you will. I've gotten creative again. And next up, I'm working on another novella right now. But as soon as that's done, I'm jumping back into this full time.
Love it. Okay, so we're getting you at an opportune time to come on the podcast and to want to dive back in. So when was the last time that you touched this page that you sent us? Like, are you working on the novel actively here, or is this something that's straight out of your PC from 1990? I'm super interested. I love this answer.
Yeah, no, this is fairly recent, and by that I mean in the last 5 or 6 years. I'm also an editor, that's one of the reasons I haven't been writing a lot, is because I've been editing other people's books.
I
But
feel you. I feel you. It's me all the time. I work on about 50 full manuscripts a year right now.
wow,
And I work with hundreds of people on the podcast and in my programs. And so, yeah. Okay. Right. Like, and sometimes I go to writers events and writers will say to me, but are you writing? And I'm like, well, yes and no. And I don't, I feel like all of my writers are writing and all of these stories are getting out there. So however it gets out there, it's all so amazing. And I'm sure that editing other people's manuscripts, you must learn a ton, right?
Oh,
You
yeah.
learn so much about how it works.
That's right.
So I love that you're coming back to this book that started 35 years ago. And I have a similar story. I worked in corporate. And when I was a teenager in the 80s and 90s, I was working on books as well. So totally feel you. And I didn't write my first novel. I sat down and wrote my first novel in my late 30s. So yeah, and I just turned 50 last week. So there you go.
Happy birthday.
It is. Thank you. It's a journey. I can guarantee that this book will not be the same. And it should not be the same as if you finished it 35 years ago, because so much has changed. And we'll go through that. Okay. And love this choice of your page to review. Thank you for sending it. I will always ask you not to send something that you think is perfect, because then we have nothing to talk about, but something that you actually want to brainstorm.
Mhm.
There's so much going on. Like, it's an action scene, and there's so much going on in an action scene. And it's really difficult to balance what I call the 5 elements of writing, which is your dialogue, your action, your reactions, your setting, and your inner thoughts, right? Those are your 5 tools that you can put on any given page. And so it's hard to balance all of those. I think you've done a pretty good job. We'll go through, there are some ways that we can actually amp this scene, because I'm jumping in here. Where is the scene in the book? Is it the opening?
No, this is a little bit, this is kind of leading up to the guy in this scene is one of the 2 protagonists. That's one of the things that's changed a little bit about this book. It's always had a couple of protagonists, but the way I'm approaching it now is more, I guess, modern vernacular would be young adult fantasy.
Yeah.
although I think it's going to appeal to a wider audience as well. But so there's two people from two completely different worlds that get put together for the sort of classic fantasy quest, right?
Yeah, love it.
And so this is before this character meets the person that's going to join those two characters together and send them out.
Okay. So we've had sort of, so you're saying two protagonists. I want to break that down just for a second.
Okay.
So you've got two point of view characters.
Yes.
You've got, so you'll be sharing it from his point of view and then from her point of view.
That's
at least,
correct.
and maybe another. Okay. Because when we say two protagonists, yes, and you can have two point of view characters, I want to make sure that you know who we want readers to care about more. Do we want, because it's never equal, right? And when you're mapping that story out, it's a lot cleaner if you can choose one of those characters to map their journey and then have the other person's journey kind of mirror, contrast, push, pull, all those things along the way. Like, so one of the characters has kind of the spine of the arc and the other character is, so if you do it, I don't want to get too deep into that because that's beyond the scope of this today. But if you've got two protagonists, when people say that, I want to make sure that you understand that, because if you don't do that, you're going to end up with two separate journeys and it misses those moments, right? So if you can map them and see if you can put their moments together, that's a really fun way to do it.
Yeah. And I won't dwell on that either, but I will say that this first book, which this is from the first of planned 3 book series, this character is definitely the lead. As a matter of fact, the other, and I refer to them as two protagonists because they end up being kind of a team. But in this book, she spends a great deal of time incarcerated. So he is trying to rescue her as well as, move the quest forward. Absolutely. He's going to be the spine, if you will, of the story.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. Okay. So that helps the context. And how old are they?
They're late teens, high school graduates, if you will, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah. Because you said that it kind of morphed into a YA story. And really, our YA characters need to be under 18. If they're beyond that, then it becomes this new adult category, which is really hard to sell. I'm not saying it's bad. It's really hard to sell. And so there's this kind of no man's land from 18 to 25 that it's kind of sits in there. So if you've got them as teenagers, just make sure they're 17 or under, and you're good, at least in book 1. Awesome. You've got your research. You know what you're doing here, and you should, because you're an editor as well. I love that. Okay. So we've got here, and so I was diving into this page without all that context, and now I know a lot more. But we'll go through my suggestions here for show, don't tell writing, which is what the podcast is all about. We've got his right shoulder drooping down, his body's natural attempt to separate itself from the pain and shock of the wound. So here, I had a question about the point of view. So I understand now that you've got a couple of point of view characters, but in genre fiction today, which this is, right? Like fantasy and YA especially, really, it's changed a lot in 35 years, right? And as I know as well, and I try to keep on top of it. But really, we want to be in third person close, which means that we're really inside your character's bodies. It's the most common point of view. And so I had a question here, whether we were really close. And the reason was because it seemed like he was really aware in the moment of why his body was reacting, which was interesting if he has a medical background or he has a lot of experience with pain. But as this is happening, to be aware and say, oh, that's just my body's natural attempt to separate itself from the pain and shock of the wound, right? It didn't feel like his voice. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I'm questioning. Otherwise, it sounds like a third-party description. So I was going to watch for this point of view choice through the page to see if it's consistent. But maybe if he's wise beyond his years, that makes sense. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. And, if I think about the character, he is just graduating from their version in his world of what would be considered kind of a forest ranger school, if you will.
Cool. So he might know this.
So his job, if you want to call it that, is going to be within his barony, would be to look after the forest and the creatures and all of these kind of things. So it's possible that he's going to have some medical background in there. And,
Perfect.
The incident right before this is he takes a crossbow bolt to the shoulder.
Okay.
He's running away. He's trying to flee somebody. So he's trying to fight through all of that and get away.
Excellent. So he's not your typical teen. So that's perfect. So when we're in his point of view, everything should be colored with what he knows and what his view of the world is. So that's perfect. If he knows that, I just flagged it because I was like, I'm dropping in without context. So that's great. And then again, several other bolts hit near him. And I didn't have the context. And so my note was, okay, because I don't have context, I don't yet know what a bolt is. But if it's, you just said it, it's a crossbow bolt. And if it's described earlier in the scene, then that's fine. I wasn't sure if this was your opening page, then you would need to give me some context there, right? And then you dive right into thank the goddess. And I'm like, I just love that. So you've got this already. You're world building. You're doing it. You're showing us what's important in their world. What we do when we, have a deity or we have swear words or whatever, we show what's important in society. So that's a really great showing detail and he's using that language, right? It's a great job there. When we get here, then we're in the middle here. Does he know who's chasing him? Do we know who's chasing him? The shadows. Do we know what those are yet?
Okay. Yes.
More or less. We know that there's shadows at least.
We know that, and I don't want to spoil anything for anybody that's listening that wants to buy my book later, but he's running away.
That's what they know so far. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
He's running away because the baron, if you will, of a neighboring province or barony killed his father and has blamed him for doing it. So typical frame up murder scene. He used this character's weapon to kill his father, put it on him.
It's all about tropes. Use them.
Yeah. He was getting carried away. So he knows the bad guys, the ones that actually did kill his father, are probably the ones chasing.
Excellent. So here, there's an opportunity though to show us what's going on here. So here's a great one. So you've got casting a quick glance behind. Atreus saw the shadows pursuing him, right? So that's a tell. You're telling us here that the shadows are pursuing him. Is he running? I mean, later on we find out that he's running and maybe before he's running. So, but a show here would look more like the shadow's black mass was a mere stride behind him, right? So rather than saying he saw the shadow behind him, see it. So the shadow's black mass was a mere stride behind him, or he held his shoulder as he sprinted forward, only missing a moment. The shadow was on his tail. He dared a glance back to see its long gray fingers dancing across the pavement, only a breath behind, right? Like, see the shadow. So don't tell me about the shadow, but what does it look like? A lot of times when we're doing magic, a mistake that writers make is that we don't make our magic big enough. It's cool in your mind and you want to say it's a shadow, but it can be so many things. I mean, Peter Pan dances with his happy shadow, right? And then there's also shadows that are like dementors out there, evil forces. Which one are we? So when you are showing magic, make it weird, make it big. This is fantasy. Don't let it be that it could just be a regular old earthbound shadow. Make it weird. So another, or something better, right? Like if you love these, I always like to say this, if you love the suggestions that we come up with, by all means have them, they're yours. But if you don't love them, sometimes that's even better. You're like, Suzy, that doesn't sound like the shadow at all. What does that shadow look like to you?
In this case, the shadows, plural, are the people that are pursuing him, the soldiers of this other baron. And
what do they look like? What do they sound like? What does it feel like?
Well, and I just call them shadows because it's nighttime and they're running through the forest, so there's not a whole lot of light. So
people.
Yeah. So what little bit of light there would be from the moon or stars or whatever, the people pursuing him are going to look like actual shadows running through the trees.
Okay. So I thought that it was going to be part of your magic system, that there was something called the shadow that was actually pursuing him. And I wanted it to be really exciting. Okay. So if they're just people, then we maybe need to say the shadows of the soldiers, all you could say, or maybe it's more like silhouettes, right? Yeah. Silhouettes of the soldiers, if it's just there, because the shadows would be what's on the ground. Okay, so perfect. So, but isn't it interesting when and you probably find this all the time when you're editing other people's, you can't see that yourself because it plays like a movie in your own mind. And then you're like, Suzy, why did you think that was a magical element? But hey, that's what happens when we write things down sometimes. So in the next part, you've done a really great job of making meaning for this for us. So you've got the initial shock and fight reflex began to wear off. and the pain of the arrow still lodged in his shoulder, threatening to bring him down. So this is awesome. So this is making meaning. He's screwed. He's hurt and he's about to go down. So great job getting us up to speed, and we're in his thoughts now. That's the element that we're using, is his inner thoughts, right? So you've got, as he ran, Atreus wondered briefly if they had poisoned the arrowhead with some agent or other. So I'm wondering why he's doing that. Is something happening that we could connect to the scene? Like, is it burning? Does it feel, has he been shot before? Does it feel off? Like, why is he wondering that?
Yeah, I think that was just my attempt at putting in a random thought that as he's running through the woods trying to escape, he's obviously aware of his wound and his previous experience, perhaps with, this is probably the primary weapon, and it's been used already previously in the book, the crossbow. So it's used all the time and it's used in various ways. So I thought, well, one way it could be used, especially by bad guys, is they'd poison the arrowhead, right?
Absolutely. And so is that what's making him woozy, or is it just the pain, right? Like those
Right.
things, or if the arrow, if it has been poisoned, what does that mean? I don't know as a reader, unless you've already described it. But if you haven't, then does it mean he might only have mere minutes? And where's the safest place? Like, it gives more agency. So if he's thinking about that, what does it mean to him? Okay, if they poison this arrow, I'm going down faster, and then I might need to take cover, or I might need to, how do I get help? How do I start yelling? I don't know. What would he do about it? Because we want, especially in YA, these heroic characters have all the guts in the world, right? And so what would he try to do? How would he try to help himself? He's going to fail, because I read to the bottom of the page. He's going to fail, but what would he try to do? Would he try to pull it out? Would he try? I mean, that's not necessarily a good idea. And he may already know that training, and he may not decide to do that. But what would he try to do? What does he know? So yeah, I want to see him trying to help himself. He's trying to run, but what else?
Yeah.
There's stuff to do. Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
So then,
right now, the whole scene is him just trying to get away, right? He's got multiple people chasing him. He knows if they catch him, he's either going to be thrown in jail for murdering his father, which he didn't do, or they're just going to kill him and say, sorry.
Does the reader know that? You're telling me what he thinks. If it's not there, it should be somewhere. Yeah, the reader knows that he will either be killed or thrown in jail, right?
If they connect the dots, they would know at this point.
We need to know the stakes, connect the dots for them. Yeah, you know these things, but we forget to put them on the page. But yeah, so then he starts to ask himself questions, right? Why should he endure the pain? Why did he flee? What was he even running from that was so horrible? And I made the comment, I was like, yeah, I actually, as the reader, I have the same questions. But why does he have these questions? Is he actually, so what I was trying to get at was, is the poison confusing him now? Or was he always this confused? Because he's confused, right? Because he's saying, why did I do this? What's going on? Like, what are my options? And that's okay for a moment, but don't leave us confused for too long, because we are your protagonist, right? We are your point of view character in the scene. And if the reader's confused for too long, they don't like it. It's sort of the same point as before, is like, what are these stakes? Like, let him think a little bit more clearly than he might in real life, because it's about what are the stakes and what is he worried about? Make that really clear. I know when we're writing drafts, then we can ask ourselves all these questions, but let's answer a few of them as well.
Yeah. And I think that just built off, the previous couple of sentences there where, he started to hear what I described as a hiss in his ears, and, he's getting weaker. And so what I considered a natural extension of that was, now he's like, why am I running? Why am I running? Right? Why don't I just give up, kind of thing?
Why doesn't he give up? One of the core things that we need to answer, right, is like, why would your protagonist go above and beyond what any normal human would do to accomplish their mission? What is his deeply personal reason, right? And I'm sure you've answered that elsewhere. I won't put you on the spot here. Okay. So I love your hissing sound. Like, introducing a sound is really smart. So showing, we often just rely on the visual, but you've made it 3D because he can't hear now. He's got this hissing sound, right? So it felt like he ran through treacle, the ground itself conspiring to slow him down. Beautiful. He willed his legs to keep going, pumping his left arm to add momentum while his right hung useless. Excellent. Very good showing. The sibilant sound grew to an almost continuous thunder in his ears, and Adrius knew the end was near. Above the roar in his ears, he heard a shout. He stumbled to a halt and looked over his left shoulder. Okay. So again, I'm looking for the stakes, and it's kind of the same comment as before. What does he think is about to happen? Have him guess, because that's going to make your reader really stressed. If we have no idea what's going to happen, or if we're just waiting, or if he's just waiting, it's not as actually as exciting as if we're anticipating it. It's weird, right? Like this, it's the way that suspense novels are built, when we know in the very beginning, we know right away what the suspense is. There's a murder, we just don't know how it happened, that type of thing. So it's that sort of thing, is if we know what's coming, sometimes that's even more suspenseful, especially in a chase scene like this. I've got a few suggestions here. Again, take them or leave them, but maybe it will push you to see what I'm getting at. Soon the shadow would overcome him and swallow his body. Again, I thought it was a fantasy shadow. I was really excited about that. Or it could drag him to the depths, right? But you're saying that he might be killed or he might be thrown in jail, right?
Yeah.
So name the danger here in his own words for maximum impact. What I mean by that is, again, color it with his point of view. What does he think the danger is, right? Like, color it with his personality. It doesn't have to be like he could go to jail or he could die. It's like he could be closed off from his family for the rest of his life in jail, or he could, what does it mean to him? Put it in his words. I don't know enough about your characters to keep guessing, but I could brainstorm all day.
Yeah. No, and that's good. And it's tricky, number one, because his mother died before this, which weighs on him, and he thinks about that in quiet moments. And that made his relationship with his father difficult, which is also discussed previously in the narrative. And I was just going to say it. The only real family that we know of, that the reader will know of, that he has, is his grandfather, who is the headmaster at the school that he went to. And as we can see in a particular scene where he comes to the house, finds his son, which is this character's father, dead, you can see in his reaction that he's maybe not buying the fact that his grandson killed his father.
Right.
But his hands are kind of tied because this guy is a ruler of a province. There's politics involved, but Atreus doesn't know that. He doesn't know that his grandfather is necessarily sympathetic. He just knows that his grandfather had him taken off to jail, right? So, and that's what he escaped from.
And so would he be disappointing his grandfather, or, what does this mean to him exactly? So am I disappointing them? Am I going to meet, my loved ones who, I don't know what they're religious, they believe in this goddess, right? There's a goddess. Do they believe in an afterlife? There's so many things here. I mean, not to go off on 3 pages of what he believes, but what he could comment on, even in one sentence, could do a lot of work. If I meet the maker, if the goddess takes me to the maker, then I'm going to see my mother who's passed before, or whatever, like maybe some of these choices aren't so bad, right? Like that's what he's grappling with. Am I at the end? And what does that mean to him? So any of those things. Then we've got Sir Adrian standing at the edge of the tree line, wreathed in torchlight. Beautiful. Thank you for the showing detail. Right? Lots of those. And then we've got another next to him, which doesn't get a showing detail, right? So I'm like, okay, I want a detail or two so that if I'm an attentive reader, I can anticipate. Again, we're trying to figure out what's happening. Let us guess. Let us anticipate. So if there's another man next to Sir Adrian, slighter of frame, but his face fierce, maybe I'm trying to guess in all the characters that I've met so far, who is that? Or maybe I'll remember it later when that other figure comes up. I'm assuming that it's somebody important, or we wouldn't be so careful with it, right? Yeah. It's going to be somebody.
This is your fantasy shadow. This character.
Okay, there is a shadow. I love it. So how is he different?
Well, number one, he doesn't want to be seen. Number two, if I just blurted it out right here, he would be recognized as the leader of the official church in my world, right? So he would be like the Pope. Only,
but if Atreus doesn't know, then we don't have to know, right? But he could see a detail that we could be like, that's weird. If it were the Pope, it's not the Pope. If it were the Pope, maybe he was wearing a hat, like or something, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
He doesn't know that word. And so he says, it's a silhouette.
Yeah.
So yeah, like what is there something that isn't going to give it away, but still is more interesting than there's another next to him, right? It's so obvious that you're trying to couch something or hide something from us that the
Yeah.
reader will be like, what is that? And they'll be more interested in it, but it's frustrating. So give us those details as you like dole them out, but don't give it away. It's tricky, right? And then at the end of the scene, he falls into darkness. And all I would say about that, I mean, you can do it. I would say that one of the easiest ways that writers come up with to start scenes and to end scenes are I woke up, I opened my eyes is a way that we often come to. It's the easiest way to start a scene, and falling into darkness is the easiest way to end a scene, which means that some readers, agents, publishers feel that it's cliche and they'll reject it just based on that, which is not fair. And there's no way to know that unless somebody tells you, but now you're going to see it. You don't see it much in writing, so it doesn't feel cliche because most editors will edit that out for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a few options. You can use it. I was just reading a New York Times bestselling fantasy, and I actually know the author very well. I texted her and said, "You let her fall into darkness at the end of a scene," and she laughed and said, "Yeah, I can get away with that, right?" But the thing is that when a scene ends with losing consciousness, we also lose that point of view. So be careful with it because it's overused. But before he goes black, I need to know what he thinks. End the scene with his forward-looking thoughts. Like, if I die, nobody's going to feed my dog. Like, obviously, that's not, what he's thinking about. What is he thinking about? That's what's going to keep us turning the page.
Yeah, I will tell you, number one, as an editor today, I would look at that and say, I would just cut into darkness. I would just say, and let it be so. As a writer, I was going through some of my old files and partial scenes and things sort of ahead of our call. And I actually have this same page that I sent you probably in 2 different ways. I've written it at least 3 times. And then there is a version of this where he's thinking while he's falling.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, well, I wonder if I should
pull it back in. Well, because what you're looking for, like, I assume, is this the end of a chapter or the end of a scene?
It is the end of a chapter, and he's actually falling off a cliff into a river. And the river is going to spit him up onto this little rock shelf where the wizard finds him.
Okay, Michael, I'm going to stop you for a moment. He's falling off a cliff into a river. Where is that on the page?
Okay, well, I can only send one page, right?
Yeah. So, but as he's falling, that's so interesting because if he fell into darkness, I just pictured him falling into the dirt, right?
Yeah.
So just show him falling. These are amazing. Think about, especially for teens reading, how many times do people talk about these dreams where you're falling or dreams where you're flying? Let us feel what that feels like before, if he blacks out at the top, that's no fun.
I actually say that in one of these other versions. He does feel like he's flying.
Yeah. So pay attention to those moments that we can be in your character's body, because especially in today's YA, like, really that third person close is really important to bring us on that journey and to let us feel that. He can still, it is a bit cliche, but you can still end it with him being unconscious as long as we have sort of this forward-looking thought. And then I want to flip the page because he's like, who's going to feed my dog? That's not what you're going to say. But whatever that thing is that he's thinking about as he's falling, we need to know, did that come true? Oh my gosh, Rover needs me. I need to keep reading, or Rover's, because what we don't want is to just think that he died or think that he's gone. We need to sort of have that forward-looking connection. Yeah. So it's a little trick at the end of your scenes, rather than to sort of end it. We always want to be dramatic and end a scene, but actually it's more interesting if you've got this sort of open-ended connection to what happens next. Even if you've got 2 point of view characters, which you do at least, right? Then we might be flipping to her point of view next. But then when we come back, we want to keep reading so that when we come back to Atreus's point of view, we can find out if he's okay. But yeah, I would highly recommend also ending it just before he falls into darkness, just from a technical standpoint. All right. How are you feeling? Are you excited to dive back into this project?
No, I am. And this is, I was trying to come up with a page that I would get the most out of. And I'm like, where I really, really need the help is here. So let me find a scene where there's a fair amount going on, but it can be encapsulated in that one page where there's enough there to work with.
I always find it amazing, especially if we're careful about which page we send, which thank you so much for trusting us with your work. And for being open to this conversation, but it also can show you that in one page, yeah, you know what, you don't have to do everything that's recommended by an editor, as you know, right? You can, but when we take it in that context and we just look at one page, it's like, woo, there's a lot of work that could be done in this scene. The biggest feedback I think I have is that I didn't feel like I knew what the stakes were, right? Like, and we've said this a few times, I think if nothing else that you take from it, if you could resolve that piece, even if you've set it up before, now he's about to die or be captured.
And I think he is.
And some things, leave it open-ended. And some things, or just fall into the bottom of a river. But some things, we need to know what he's thinking. And some things are going to become very clear. And so rather than have him be really confused and option choices, maybe something becomes crystal clear that's important. I think that, that would really make us feel like, what if I were about to be captured or die? What becomes important? It shows a lot about your character development and your character strength. So you've got this one sentence where you described your book, and I just was really excited about bigger context, just to get people excited about where this book is headed. A young man accused of murdering his father finds himself joined with a young woman from another land, and together they are commissioned by an enigmatic wizard to find an ancient and holy artifact. I just absolutely can't wait to hear what happens. So I wish you all the success on your publishing journey. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope this was super helpful.
Suzy, it was awesome. I really appreciate you.
Thanks for tuning in to Show Don't Tell Writing with me, Suzy Vidori. Help me continue to bring you the straight goods for that book you're writing or planning to write. Please consider subscribing to this podcast and leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you're listening. Also visit suzyvidori.com/newsletter to hop on my weekly Inspired Writing newsletter list, where you'll stay inspired and be the first to know about upcoming training, events, and writing courses that happen in my community. If you're feeling brave, check the show notes and send us a page of your writing that isn't quite where you want it to be yet for our Show Don't Tell page review episodes. Remember, that book and your writing is going to open doors that you haven't even thought of yet, and I can't wait to help you make it the absolute best. If you're feeling called to write that book, keep going, and I'm going to be right here cheering you on. See you again next week.